Hi friends, myself Atira Siyar. I am ML first year student of Institute of Advanced Studies in Education, Thrissur. Here I would like to tell the review of a book, The Culture of Education by the eminent cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner. First of all, let me introduce the author Jerome Seymour Bruner. Jerome Seymour Bruner is a well known psychologist who made immensely meaningful contributions to cognitive learning theory and human cognitive psychology in the field of educational psychology. His other fields of interest include general philosophy of education as well as history. Born on 1st October 1915 in New York, he did BA in psychology from Duke University. After that, he completed master's degree in psychology followed by a doctorate degree from Harvard University. Jerome Bruner's first article was published in 1939. Bruner is one of the most influential psychologists who has laid the foundation for groundbreaking researches in the cognitive psychology. He identified that sensation and perceptions are active processes rather than passive ones, conducting a series of experiments on perception which posed a challenge to psychologists in the terms of interpreting the organism's response to stimulus externally as well as internally. He has awarded with many awards and honors in recognition of his profound works in the field of psychology. Most prominently, he was awarded with Distinguished Scientific Research Award by American Psychological Association. He has also published numerous books that reflect his varied accomplishments as a researcher and a psychologist. His literary works consist of several books on cognitive psychology, educational psychology, and language development. Now we can move on to the review. The Culture of Education presents 9 essays which provokes thoughts on the subject of cultural psychology and its implication for education. The essays embody Bruner's considerable experiences, knowledge, and wisdom of the science of learning and culture's influence on teaching and learning in the present context. A scholar of psychology, Bruner defines cultural psychology as a system that describes how humans make sense of their world. A cultural approach to education describes how the mind works the science of learning with culture. In Bruner's work, the theory of education lies at the intersection between the nature of mind and the nature of culture. The essays are still relevant in today's context with the abundance of educational technology. Bruner provides a unique construct for thinking about technology. He describes how humans make sense of the world where learning and thinking are dependent upon cultural settings and the use of cultural artifacts. Thinking of educational technology as artifacts of nature and culture and learning as a dependent on culture put technology in different perspectives. Technology as a part of culture suggests education need to embrace technology as according to Bruner, learning is always dependent upon the cultural setting and its resources. Technology in education settings, as many have already argued, needs to be closely linked with pedagogy. Bruner uses education as a test frame for his ideas about cultural psychology. According to Bruner, he argues that because of its interactive, communicative, and situated nature, and because teaching and learning take place outside as well as inside of schools, education is eminently appropriate for testing a cultural psychology. In the first essay, Culture, Mind and Education, Bruner devotes significant discussion about broader perspective of the 9 tenets of about the nature of mind as it functions within cultural enterprises. Bruner is critical of the information processing theory, or what he calls computationalism, and comparing the mind to computational device. Bruner proceeds to methodically outline how the psycho-cultural approach addresses learning via 10 tenets that each include to varying degrees culture's influence and theory of the mind cognitivism. Bruner argues each tenet elegantly. The tenets include the relativity of making meaning to context, the constraints on meaning making that result from our mental functions and symbol system, the constructed nature of reality, the interactional nature of education, the externalization of what is learned in works or hours that allows for debate and reflection, the instrumental nature of education in the social and economic lives of learner, and the institutional nature of education, none better than number 7, institutional tenet. The institutional tenet refers to all type of institution is embodying a distinct culture reflected in symbols, stories and power figures, and the crucial role of education in shaping identity and self-esteem, and the role of the narrative in creating a sense of personal place in society. Complex structures within institution, Bruner argues, leads to coercion, power struggles which are especially detrimental for entities responsible for education. Bruner concludes that any efforts towards improvement or reform by education institutions must involve teachers. Teachers are critical and central to reform efforts. Several of the essays, quite practical in nature, focus on how to teach effectively. The second essay, Folk Pedagogy, begins into the open idea that teachers do not always approach teaching and learning effectively. Teachers and students bring with them to the classroom preconceived ideas of how learning happens, explained in part by ingrained culture beliefs about how the mind works. Bruner outlines in his methodical manner 4 models of the mind based on preconceived ideas and the related education goals of each. Bruner suggests that by examining and evaluating each carefully, we are then able to rethink our approach to education. Pedagogy is not innocent, Bruner states, it's a medium that carries its own message. The later statement is an example of how powerful and deep Bruner's ideas are. The remaining essays are just as stimulating as the first two. Each present a dimension of education worth examining. It challenges the reader to think about teaching and education from different viewpoints, sometimes several. In the subsequent essays, Bruner elaborates one from the tenet represented in the opening essay and offers evidence and debate relevant to each. He considers how it is imperative to understand the influence of folk pedagogy in shaping teachers and the larger society's theories of children's minds and classroom practice. In these essays, he asks several questions like what constitutes curriculum, what it means to understand and explain others' minds, and what it means to know something, etc. This gives more focus to education and psychology by including interdisciplinary approach from the terms of anthropology, sociology, literature, science, and philosophy. From this, we can understand Bruner emphasizes the importance of intersubjectivity, which means how people come to know what others have in mind and how they adjust accordingly to successful development and educational outcomes. As Bruner points out, in guiding educational reform, we must have clear direction and face the questions of what kind of people we want to be. The Culture of Education is a book that challenges us to get the heart of the matter of education in deep and thoughtful ways. Lastly, when we came to the conclusion, it has been clear that the culture of education deserves a place on every educator's bookshelf. Bruner is a remarkable scholar, author, and a man. At 99 years of age, his contribution to the study and advancement of education are numerous. The Culture of Education is just one of Bruner's many works well worth studying. It's an indispensable guide to finding answer to today's toughest questions about education. Even though this is a book of essays about education, it is by no means limited to education in the usual sense of classroom and schools. In this work, Bruner reveals how education can usher children into their culture, though it often fails to do so. Applying the newly emerging cultural psychology to education, Bruner proposes that the mind reaches its full potential only through partnership participation in the culture, not just formal arts and sciences, but its ways of perceiving, thinking, feeling, and carrying out discourse. By examining both the educational practice and educational theory, Bruner explores new and rich ways of approaching many of the classical problems that perplex educators. Educators, psychologists, and students of minds and culture will find in this volume an unsettling criticism that challenges our conventional practices as well as a voiced vision that charts a direction for the future. Thank you.